Our lesson on neuropharmacology is all about how drugs affect our brain. So this is, again, part of our option A for our biology higher level for IB. So, summation. A postsynaptic neuron may have more than one neuron synapsing with it. So if we take a look at neuron number D here, it's being acted on by 3 other neurons. So it's getting information from 3 sources. So nerve impulses will either be inhibited or initiated based on a summation of all the neurotransmitters from the presynaptic neurons. So there'll be neurotransmitters coming from all 3 of these neurons, telling this to either fire an action potential or not. If the sum of all the signals is excitatory, then the nerve impulse will fire. And if the sum of them all are inhibitory, then the nerve impulse will not fire. Recall that neurotransmitters bind to receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. So as the nerve impulse is traveling down the first neuron, it gets to the synapse. Neurotransmitters travel across the synapse and bind to receptors on the dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron. So excitatory neurotransmitters like epinephrine or acetylcholine excite the postsynaptic neuron for a longer period of time, and it'll allow an action potential to fire. Inhibitory neurotransmitters prevent action potentials because they cause sodium and potassium channels in the postsynaptic neuron to open, and it causes a change of ions, a movement of ions that prevents the postsynaptic neuron from reaching threshold. So it won't reach negative 50 millivolts. So a nerve impulse can't go. There are 2 kinds of neurotransmitters, fast-acting ones and slow-acting ones. A fast-acting neurotransmitter will bind with the postsynaptic membrane less than a millisecond after the action potential reached the synapse. So 2 fast-acting neurotransmitters are acetylcholine and glutamate. So it's a quick response. Slow-acting neurotransmitters take a much longer time to have the same effect. This is because they have to activate a second messenger on the postsynaptic membrane. So the neurotransmitter binds to the first receptor, which then has to pass a message on to a second receptor, and then the response can happen. This, though, isn't a bad thing. These slow-acting neurotransmitters can help modulate the effects of fast-acting neurotransmitters. As I mentioned before, slow-acting neurotransmitters cause the release of secondary messengers that can persist for longer periods of time. So this causes what is known as long-term potentiation, which is thought to be related to how learning occurs and memories are stored. And this might help us remodel the synapses and the connections between 2 neurons. And it can also allow for new synapses to be made in the brain, and particularly in the hippocampus portion of the brain. Saying all that and talking about different neurotransmitters, we're going to talk about our brain on drugs. So drugs can either block or enhance neurotransmitters. And as a result, they'll either increase or decrease postsynaptic transmission. So they'll either cause action potential to fire on the postsynaptic neuron or inhibit it. So psychoactive drugs, they change the state of mind because they alter the activity at the postsynaptic neuron, and they can either calm or excite individuals' moods depending on the type of psychoactive drug it is. I recommend, if you want to see a little bit more information, you can watch the crash course, the one that's listed below. The portion that deals with drugs is at 5 minutes and 51 seconds. You do need to be able to discuss 2 excitatory and 2 inhibitory drugs for your IB exam. Nicotine, cocaine, and amphetamines are all examples of excitatory drugs. Benzodiazepine, alcohol, and THC are all inhibitory drugs. I'll talk about one excitatory and one inhibitory drug, and you'll be responsible for learning the details of another one of each. So cocaine. It blocks dopamine reuptake so that it builds up in the synaptic cleft. And remember, dopamine is that pleasure, euphoric neurotransmitter. So it controls the brain's reward and pleasure centers. And these neurons are going to be acted upon more because of the effects of cocaine blocking the reuptake, because the dopamine is staying in the synaptic cleft. So this is an excitatory response, and it can cause feelings of euphoria, and you can actually feel more alert and be more energetic. And it's very addictive because everybody likes to feel good, and that's why cocaine is addictive, because it makes you feel good. THC is found in cannabis, also known as marijuana, and it blocks cannabinoid receptors, which are found, again, in your brain, and it results in blocking excitatory neurotransmitters. So this is an inhibitory drug, and it can interfere with pain responses as well. So this is why medical marijuana can be used by cancer patients to decrease their pain, and for other people to decrease their pain. And THC users often report feeling relaxed. As I mentioned already, you need to choose either a stimulus or a sedative or a depressant, and research how, actually you'll need one of each. Research how it affects the brain. You'll share what you found with the class, and you, for the exam, are responsible for knowing 2 stimulants and 2 sedatives. We've done cocaine and THC as examples, but you'll do more for your exam studying purposes. Anesthetics are another type of drug. They work by preventing transmission of nerve impulses between our sensory neurons and the central nervous system. So there's different kinds of anesthetic. A local anesthetic is in a specific area. So when you get numbing done for dental procedures, like having a cavity filled, that's a local anesthetic. You prevent nerve transmission from your sensory neurons in your tooth region and the central nervous system. So you can't feel the pain, even though something painful is being done to your tooth. And then a general anesthetic causes a complete lack of sensation and unconsciousness. So for a major surgery, you would have general anesthetic. Endorphins are natural pain relievers, basically. So they're central nervous system neurotransmitters that have pain relieving properties. They're small peptides, so short polypeptide chains. They bind to opiate receptors and block transmission of pain signals by inhibiting synaptic transmission. So if you're taking opioids, so morphine, even codeine, heroin, they mimic endorphins and they bind to those opiate receptors, and our brain thinks, well, I'm already making enough endorphins, so stops making them itself. So if you try to withdraw from these medications or drugs, you aren't making endorphins anymore. So things will feel painful when they shouldn't feel painful. So basically you've prevented making your own endorphins anymore, and you feel pain at the slightest thing. Another fun fact about endorphins, when you laugh, you actually release some endorphins, so laughter truly can be the best medicine, so to speak. So one thing you need to discuss is the causes of drug addiction. And it's a combination of a variety of things. So it can be genetic. So some studies have shown that some people have predispositions to addiction due to their genetic makeup. Dopamine secretion, so drugs that involve the reward pathway can become addictive because the users begin to depend on them to feel good and feel better. And then social factors, so peer pressure, poverty, trauma, mental health, all of those things can contribute to addiction. And again, there's a SciShow on the chemistry of addiction that you might want to explore further.